Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Warframe video. So I just want to talk about my current Ember build after the changes implemented on the Warframe. Now, players might suggest trying out the Healing Flame build for the Overguard mechanic, or the old but gold Thermal Sunder Ember that replaces her 4th ability, then spamming the Heat version of the Subsume skill. However, I am more of a Weapon Master Ember, and this build allows me to enjoy my sweet Doom music cannon that can melt Steel Path enemies easily. So, the weapon I am using for this Ember combo is the Koumei with the Napalm Nightwatch weapon augment. Honestly, this weapon is not that good when dealing damage to Steel Path level sometimes, but in the hands of Ember, this can turn into an insane melting machine. To make this a good killing weapon for the synergy, try to equip as much damage with heat and damage to your mod setup. Take note that Nightwatch Napalm is not really to increase the DPS of the gun, but I have included this to my build for the heat proc stacking. The damage from Nightwatch Napalm is not affected by critical mods nor the Rifle Elementalist mod. These mods are here to increase the direct area of effect hit of the Koumei and not the damage over time of the Nightwatch Napalm. The only mod affecting this weapon augment is the primed Firestorm that increases the radius of the Napalm. This is great as each shot has a wide area of effect, allowing you to inflict heat status to multiple enemies. Normally the direct hit is the one that's doing massive kills, and there are instances wherein this setup can deal millions of damages. Also, I would like to say that critical setup is not always the best setup for Ember and the Koumei. In fact, even with this Riven mod, paired with critical delay, the weapon only gets a measly 34% critical chance boost. The good thing though is you can still hit yellow critical hits on its direct area of effect damage if you will equip the Arcane Avenger in your build, which grants a 45% flat critical chance buff to the build. In this case, the final critical chance of this weapon will be 89%, enough to hit those yellow crit numbers. In addition, the status chance of this build is not that good, but we can get away with that since we have Nightwatch Napalm that grants guaranteed heat procs, and as well as using Ember's Fireball Frenzy augment. Now, the reason why I did not go with something like a Spamcaster Ember build and stick with a Weapon Master build is because Fireball Frenzy is one of the best augment that buffs your gun damage to insane levels. The heat damage buff does increase more due to Ember's passive that grants additional power strength per enemy that are inflicted with heat status effect. There are instances that you can gain 100% power strength buff from this build only using the Koumei with the Napalm Nightwatch to spread the heat status proc. This will buff the weapon with 460+% or even more heat damage. And then you can also add Roar in your build, which also buffs any damage over time, such as the heat element. The heat damage will be insane because one, we have the buff coming from the Fireball Frenzy augment, and then we have Roar. Then we also have a faction mod that also increases the damage over time of this setup. The only thing I don't like about this Fireball Frenzy Ember though is that the heat element does combine with other primary element damage. If you get unlucky and teamed up with a Volt that has the Shock Trooper augment, then the heat element will combine with electric, forming radiation, which will mess up your damage. But the good news is you rarely see a Volt using the Shock Trooper augment unless they are doing some specific weapon combos. This Ember build is Steel Path ready, by the way, and after a couple of forma, I ended up with this build, which is still not yet optimized. First of all, Steel Charge is unnecessary and it doesn't contribute to this build's damage. Its main purpose is for the extra mod capacity so I can equip all necessary mods for this build. If you have extra Umbral Forma, then you can use one on this build so you can remove Steel Charge and go for Growing Power instead. Then you can add Primed Flow and Max Adaptation in this build. The main survivability of Ember is her Immolation skill, which grants 90% damage reduction at max heat. However, it's hard to keep max immolation every time with this build since I have Blind Rage to further increase the heat damage buff of my first ability, and as well as increase the DOT buff of Roar. In most cases, I case Fire Blast when the energy consumption is too fast, which will give me around 70% damage reduction most of the time. If only Roar is not very good for this synergy, then I would have chosen Eclipse for the damage reduction buff. However, you can still survive Steel Path levels with this build since the damage reduction from Immolation does affect shields, and it pairs well with the damage reduction also of adaptation, which also affects both shield and health. Finally, I did not go for any range as Fire Blast has a base of 25 meters range, and every time I cast my third skill to lower the heat level of Immolation, I make sure that I always hit the target to strip armor and deal massive damage to them. Then, Prime Sure-Footed is a must for this build, especially if you are using a OE weapons like the Koumei that will constantly knock you back when shooting. In terms of Archon shards, I have 4 Red Tau forged to increase my power strength and give more bonus damage buff to both Roar and Fireball Frenzy. The green shard is a personal choice, and I have this on my build since Koumei is not the only weapon good for this Ember build. I sometimes use my favorite weapon with this combo, which is the Incarnator build with Corrosive and Heat. Then you can also use other beam weapons with the same mod combination, just like the Sentient Surge Accuker, the Koumei Nucor, or even the Tenet Cycron. This Ember build is really versatile when it comes to weapon buffing, and it does deal massive damage, especially if you are using beam weapons or weapons that can inflict heat stack in a wide radius. Now, go try this out for yourself, but before doing so, we humbly ask that you support us by simply liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you again in our next video.